welcome back. So let me give you an idea of what the various media outlets have been reporting this week. 3 stories made headlines. The first to do with the demands by certain people for the closure of the senior high schools that have reopened for students to write their final examinations. The second one had to do with the back and forth between the communications minister as well as GBC over the cancellation, for want of a better word, of some 3 channels belonging to the state broadcaster, and also issues surrounding COVID, the registration exercise, as well as the receiver announcing that it tends to pay fully depositors their funds, as well as workers their severance package by the end of July. So these are the main stories that made headlines, but how were they captured by the various media outlets? Let's start with the closure of the schools and go to City Newsroom and see how they capture that story. Now, one of the stories they reported on the matter, Accra Girls SHS, 7 students who tested positive for COVID-19 recover. This story came in on Thursday evening. Still with City Newsroom, Ghana's COVID-19 outlook getting better. This is from the Ghana Health Service. Let's move away from City Newsroom and go to some other news portals and go to Ghanaian Times, where it reports Ghana losing fight against COVID-19, says the NDC. The new publisher, COVID-19, angry parents storm Accra Girls School to demand missing students. We go to the Ghanaian publisher. It says, we won't cancel 2020 WASI BEC. This is GES speaking over there. Daily Graphic, closing SHS will be disastrous. GES, but parents of Accra Girls students want children home. The Finder says GES defends decision to keep students in school. Let's go to ABC News. Calls to shut down reopened schools untenable, Education Minister. Ghanaian Times again says 10 more SHS hit by COVID-19. Maoli School, Bishop Herman, Archbishop Porter Girls, among others, affected. We go to the Daily Graphic. It says protectors at receiving end. COVID-19 hits art health workers. 779 contract virus. 9 lose lives. Let's move away from COVID-19 and the closure of some schools and go to election, see the issues around the registration exercise. On City Newsroom, the story there says Banda, family in grief over killing of 28-year-old relative. Still with City Newsroom, NDC Youth Wing threatens citizens' arrest over Banda residents' killing. Daily Graphic, 2020 elections about comparison of leadership records. That's President speaking over there. The Chronicle, student killed in NDC MPP crossfire. The Daily Statesman says 2020 polls about records. Akufo-Addo tells MPP communications giants. And then let's wrap up on that story. Go to the Herald. They had a story of the MPPs, Abronye and others on rampage in Bono, trainee teacher mistaken and killed for NDC agent. Let's move to the issue to do with the channels on the GBC matter. Go to City Newsroom and it says ESLA's directive for reduction of GBC TV channels, oppression of the media. Rekubobe speaking. City Newsroom still, GBC runs to NMC for help after request to reduce channels. Still on that news site, minority challenges communications ministry's move to reduce GBC's channels. So that's the story around the GBC and Communications Ministry matter. Let's go to the issue to do with the receiver on payments of customers of collapsed financial institutions and go to City Business News. The first story over there says receiver to pay all depositors of defunct microfinance and savings and loans firms by end of July. Still on that website, prosecutions will begin in August. Receiver for defunct microfinance and savings and loan firms speaking over there. And finally, negotiations to pay claims to ex-staff of microfinance and savings and loans firms start today. So those are the stories that made headlines for this week on media outlets as well, online portals as well as newspapers, radio and TV and all that. So let me bring in my guys today who would look at the issues as reported. I have Samuel Atamensa is with City FM and City TV. Samuel, welcome.
Thank you.
Then I have Selim Adonu also with City TV and City FM. He heads the articles and features department or unit here. Gentlemen, welcome. Selim, welcome.
Thank you.
So let's start with the teachers calling for a closure of the senior high schools. We know they've gone back to school, the final year students, and there have been some back and forth on the matter. We're told about 100 cases of COVID-19 in 34 senior high schools have been recorded. And yesterday, which was Wednesday, the various teacher unions released a statement. I'm just going to go pick some of the key things they said about that statement. It's quite a lengthy one. So if you permit me to do that, well, they say that when the president announced that he intended to open the schools, they were not happy about that. And of course, they made some statements to that fact. But after that, they were assured that certain things will be done, including about 6 key things they raised. First, there'll be the disinfections, there'll be the provision of face masks, there'll be the mapping of all schools to health facilities. Also, there'll be the boarding schools being organized into batches to reduce overcrowding, and also the issue of no visitors being allowed in the schools. Now, there were also a number of protocols that students were supposed to adhere to. So let me read the statement now. They say that to their utter shock and dismay, the conditionalities which were to ensure the safe and invigorating atmosphere in which students could study soundly did not materialize. All the protocols and provisions were either limited or they were not there. That's their first issue. Now they say that the situation is grim and deadly, and they believe that if the schools are not shut down, it will cause some catastrophe. Now they say that they feel that their children are the prey, the targets. I'm now reading exactly what they said. Our children are the prey, the targets. Our children are on the receiving end, while such critical bodies such as the Ministry of Finance, the Bulk Oil Storage and Transportation Company, the Ghana Gridco Limited, and the Ghana Cocoa Board, among others, are either on partial or total lockdown. In light of the above, we, the pre-tertiary teacher unions, that's NAT, NAGRA, TEU, CCT, Ghana, have no option than to ask that the schools be closed down. For how long can we stand and look while our children are consigned to imminent death? We cannot stand any unwarranted catastrophe. Our children are our future and we must protect them. And it's signed by the various unions, including NAGRAT, whose president is Angel Kabonu, Thomas T. Musa, General Secretary of NAT, as well as the TEU General Secretary and all that. So some issues being raised by the teacher unions over there. Now, prior to that, we had others also raising similar concerns about the reopening of schools. Indeed, my old school, which is Accra Girls, the conversation started around there because they were the first on the record to have recorded some 6 cases. Subsequently, a teacher and the spouse recorded the case. Let me start with you on this whole issue about reopening and the challenges we are now facing and what we can do about them.
Well, thanks, Vivian. I think the teachers have it, the unions have it within their rights to air the views the way perhaps they have done. Only that perhaps it appears quite alarmist, but maybe they are with the situation and they feel that is how they must capture it. But I recall that when this discussion about reopening schools came up initially, the unions were so opposed. I think they got into a meeting with the authorities and they came back quite satisfied with the measures put in place. I don't know what has changed, because when you listen to Dr. Okoboy, Deputy Health Minister, and even Dr. Educhum, and even the Ghana Education Service, you have the impression that they have supplied the schools the PPE and the hand sanitizers and all the things they said they were going to do. But it appears that that really is not the situation. Reopening, we said it last week, that closing down the schools is a tough ask, because for me it will be counterproductive to close down the schools now. A number of things were said in the beginning. They will supply PPE, they will disinfect or fumigate the schools, they will map schools to hospitals in the various areas, and there will be an audit of facilities to be sure that the sick bays or the infirmaries were in good shape to be able to hold or keep students who may be manifesting symptoms or even ill, from COVID. Some of the schools said that has been done in respect of the infirmaries, but I'm not sure how far-reaching that particular condition.
Well, we're told that in certain schools they don't even have a proper infirmary.
So that is so that clearly is a problem, and I'm not saying that perhaps they should have ensured that all infirmaries were up and running before reopening the schools. But what I think should have been done was the fact that they should have had a contingency plan. A plan should have been put in place that if it happens, this is how we are going to deal with it. But the situation in some schools that recorded cases, at least Accra Girls Matter, and even what happened in the KNUST school, even though that was not the case of COVID, clearly shows that that information was not available. So, for example, in the Accra Girls case, how to even communicate with the parents, the protocols, it wasn't there. So everybody appeared confused. And if you're a parent and you live in Accra, and the school is in Accra, and you hear that X number of children or students have contracted a disease or have been infected, naturally as a parent, you'll be alarmed. I'm sure panicking. That was what led to what happened. But I'm happy almost all of these students have recovered, and that's quite some good news. There were other directives given. Now, for example, no parent should be allowed into the school. All boarders and all day students will become boarders also in schools with boarding facilities, and there are going to be about 25 students per class. That is great. I'm sure the 25 students per class thing was done. All students becoming boarders. I'm not so sure how that has been, because that's a logistical matter, because we have day schools too. But I think in schools that are purely boarding schools, to some extent that has been done. And the whole essence of that is to seal up the school and then prevent outsiders from coming, from introducing foreign material, in this case, COVID possibly in the school. So if that is done, the school becomes isolated in that sense, and you deal with people just within the school like a camp. So you have.
Is the isolation really what it is? Because we have staff of the school going in and out.
Lower probability of infection. And you see, people talk about the infection as if some of the students could have even come to the school with the infection. Anyway. So it's not as if that engagement or that interaction between the school and the outside world necessarily got the infection there. But my only difficulty was that it got to a point, the communication and the objective became a bit unclear. So, for example, no student or no parent should go into the school. But now Electoral Commission is being allowed into the school for registration purposes.
Okay, we'll get to those issues, but let's bring it in some minutes. It appears when we planned to open the schools, we had beautiful ideas or beautiful measures we put on paper to ensure that if there are spreads, they are reduced, and if they happen, we can take care of it well. But we are not really seeing that implementation practically in the schools, according to what the teacher unions are saying.
Thank you, Vivian. I don't think I have any view which is different from what Selom has said. I will just quickly categorize the emerging issues into two columns. So column one will be a communication challenge, and then column two will have a resource challenge. Communication in the sense that what was promised to the teaching community and the students community in terms of what will be available, what they were going to ensure was going to be done, and all these things. And all was well-meaning to be able to achieve a certain appreciable level of safety. Now, I am not so sure whether that by itself suggests that there will never be any infections. I'm not sure.
Definitely there will be infections.
So, when I listen to the statements, it feels like you promised us that there won't be any infections, and now there are infections. That's what I keep hearing. But I'm saying that we know the rate of infection in Ghana. We know the rate or the trends.
Yeah.
And so we will know that of every 1,000 people that you gather, you are likely to get X percent. You are likely to get X percent. So we should have that in mind. Now, what we are saying is that it should not get out of hand, because if it gets out of hand, it's a disaster.
Yeah.
And we all agree up to this point. How we communicate this is very important. Very, very important. I have always liked the way the Director General of
Professor
Patrick Abuaji, I like the way he communicates. I don't know him, I've never met him before, but he communicates in a very solemn manner. He promises and he gives you hope. I'm not so sure whether I am particularly enthused by Dr. Nsia Sari, particularly regarding something that happened yesterday with the private medical practitioners thing and his responses. I think his responses were unfortunate, So in a situation where people become hysteric because of the unknown, you need to calm people down with words that will encourage and bring hope. It's not to be dismissive. I think this communication thing and how we engage the stakeholders, I mean, no matter what assurances you give me, if I have my children in a secondary school and I hear that there's a COVID situation, I'm going to lose my sleep.
Yeah.
And so we should understand the parents as they make the demands. We should understand. You know? So, but again, not to take anything for granted. We should keep engaging the stakeholders, including the parents. Because you see, like Salom said, the option of, okay, we have stopped, let everybody go home. I think we've gone past that.
We can't do that.
That they should go home. They will write the exams.
Yeah.
But I come to the resources issue. We should be sure and deliberate that we are resourcing the schools like we promised. If there are no PPEs, somebody must make sure that there are PPEs. If there are no sanitizers, somebody must make sure. It looks as if we stop short at the promise. Now, who is going to supervise the process of executing the promise? Now, I am sure that if you are, middle class people can be a bit loud when it comes to these things. Everywhere. The people at the lower end of the economic spectrum, you may not be hearing their voices, but they are in the larger numbers. Okay? Assuming you are, say, a taxi driver with 2 children within ages 15 and, say, 18, meaning that they will be in SHS. When you leave them home at dawn to go and ply your trade, do you know who they deal with whilst you are away in the community where they live? And teenagers don't stay at home.
They don't want to go out and see what's happening.
They will be all over the place in the community. And you, the taxi driver yourself, how many people do you come into contact with on a daily basis? So the point I'm trying to make is that the fact that you leave school and go home does not insulate you from getting infected. So being in school at this time may even be safer for certain categories of people. The market woman who's exposed to hundreds of people on daily basis, they leave the market, they go home. You don't know who you've been exposed to. And the worst part is that for them in the lower bracket, when they have the symptoms, they don't even know. Even if they know, they don't even have access to the health facilities. Even here, trying to get tested, how long did it take us? It takes forever. So I'm just saying that we should be patient at this point. The schools, in my estimation, provide a safe haven for them. Safe haven, not to say that they will not be infected. I have reduced the thing to say that where 2 or 3 are gathered.
It's moving around.
Where 2 or 3 are gathered, COVID is also around. So when you see crowd, by all means, so we should rather be prepared to give assistance when they are exposed. We can't just leave them like that and pray and hope that nothing will happen. Let's rather say that because they have gathered, something will happen. Now, but if that something happens, is the head of the school prepared and resourced? School infirmary, school clinics, you know. So I think that the focus at this point is to make sure that the schools are heavily resourced and COVID ready, because once there's crowd, something can happen.
But we are struggling with that, getting the resources. Even we're told of an audit of the infirmary. So now we don't know what came up with that audit and where we've gotten to help those that, you know.
That is the reality. The reality is that we are struggling with that. But we are now looking for the solution. And I'm saying that the solution, what is under our control, is how to harness the resources. You heard was it the minister or somebody saying that they imported some of the materials and they just arrived, instance arrived. Okay, meaning that is under our control. Now, what we cannot manage is letting the students go back home at this point. Now, if they go back home, they go back into their communities. And we all, you see, we sit in Accra and Kumasi and the urban centers and think that Ghana is defined by only urban centers. If you go to the villages, their perception and their realities about this issue is totally different. It's totally different. So I think that we should be patient, urge government to do what they promised to do. I mean, I agree with the teacher unions if they are making demands. My only departure is where they say close the schools down. Because that's not, that is oversimplifying a rather convoluted situation. And that I depart. But to insist that government does what they promised to do, 100% I agree.
Okay. The calls for mass testing, can we afford it and should we consider it? of the kids, or random testing, rather than wait for things to happen in a bit to reduce the spread and all that, which is also an issue.
Mass testing will be difficult because we are over 800,000 students. Some even say over 1 million students as a country since March that in fact, since COVID started, because we initially had cases that proved negative. Since COVID started, we've tested less than 400 or 450,000 people. And now we're going to mass test over 1 million students within what period? I don't think we have the resources to do that now. Random testing, yes, I can agree with that. So I think that is not very different from, quite different from contact tracing. But if you test somebody randomly, why don't you just contact trace? You know, so contact tracing is what I think we must harp on, so that, you know, wherever you suspect a case.
But is this contact tracing working? For example, one of the schools we were told they did the contact tracing. The testing, they still don't have their results. These kids are still there, mixing with everybody else.
If you did mass testing too, you will not have the results in time. I think it's an issue of resource and how we deploy our logistics. So I'm happy, and of course, in the past few days, we heard they had difficulties with the reagents and consumables. In South Africa, said they have some now. Indeed, we've seen some numbers coming in. Will you hope, of course, they said what they have will take them for like 3 months. We hope that they're able to use them judiciously so that we will see value for money. And the turnaround time for the test waiting for 5 days, 10 days before you get a result.
If you're lucky,
I
10
think
days
it
is
is
a
not
lucky
proper
side.
because you need the result to make decisions. If somebody is isolated or somebody is suspected to have a case, you test the person. You need to make decisions, and so when the result comes early, you're able to make the decision. Look at the hospitals, for example. You know, you need to make a decision. A health worker is coming into contact with somebody, or somebody is showing certain symptoms. May not be COVID, but you need the result in order to help the health professionals know what to do. If certain people have to quarantine themselves, they do that. So we know what to do. So the issue about the turnaround time should actually be looked at. And I was happy when Isasari said that they are looking at opening more testing centers. And indeed, the Society of Private Medical, indeed, we've seen improvement somewhat. When we started, we had Noguchi and KCCR. Now we have the UHAS lab, we have the public. 5. Exactly. So now there are almost 8 or 10 now. And I'm sure there's a discussion indeed from the Society of Private Medical and Dental Practitioners. Some of them say they are ready to
use their facilities.
Exactly. And I'm sure it's part of the discussions they should be having or they'll be having with government. So we will need to open up and ensure that we have more centers that can do the tests so that anybody who can afford, I don't know whether it should be free across the board, but anybody who can afford should walk into any center and get tested. And the person should have the results in less than 48 hours. It helps.
Okay, we have to take a quick break, and then when we come back, we'll look at the Society of Private Medical and Dental Practitioners on the COVID thing. But whilst you were talking, just a quick one from Samuel, whilst you were talking about the mass testing, he was shaking his head.
No, I think that this whole mass testing thing is I don't know where that's coming from. I don't see which country has even attempted doing mass testing. And with our resource level, we are thinking of mass testing. I mean, everybody is doing symptomatic testing or contact tracing, and it works. It works. Look, you see, the ultimate is to be able to establish a culture of social distancing. If we have this culture of social distancing in all facets of our life, it's half the problem solved. You understand? Because see, you can get COVID and recover and get it again if you defy the social distancing regulations. So no matter which solution we choose, which option we choose, we cannot compromise the social distancing, no matter what.
In fact, social distancing should be the centerpiece of every solution.
Which is the ideal situation, but it's a difficult one, especially
it's a difficult one, not in Ghana.
Everywhere.
In society, because that's how society is built. On relationships with one another. And this is how we've lived for centuries. So this COVID thing is actually fighting against the way we have structured our societies. So that means that it's not going to be a 24-hour changeover. There's a social marketing aspect of it, behaviors, how people are going to change the way they do things. And it takes time. Maybe the government itself must reconsider its education approach, because the education itself hasn't been insistent enough. It has not been insistent enough. We listen too much to middle class people and assume that they define the problems of Ghana, and that's my concern.
Today you're on the middle class people. Hold on. Let me go for a quick break. When we come back, we'll look at the concerns being raised by the Society of Private Medical Practitioners and also the brouhaha between the Ministry of Communications as well as GBC. We'll be right back. Don't go away.
This is our father, Tata Nelson Mandela. We call him Tata Kholishahla Nelson Mandela. Kholishahla means the one that causes trouble. This is, I love arts and culture, traditional wear. I also love your traditional wear here, your kente, your tie-dye, and your beautiful fabrics. Grew up in the Johannesburg area, but in those days we were not born in hospitals, we were born at home. So when my mother was supposed to have me, the baby, she had to go home to the Eastern Cape to go to her mother. And her mother was the midwife.
It's been a life of service, a life of activism, and a life that really defines what it means to fight for the freedom of your people.
We had our leaders, Mama Sisulu and Mama Mandela, who were also looking after us as young girls and, training us and teaching us about our history way back, where we came from. This is our traditional food meal. It's called ngqusho.
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 So yeah, welcome back to What the Papers Are Saying. My name is Vivian Kai. Look, I'm here with Sela Maduna as well as some more Achamensa, looking at some of the stories that made headlines this week. So we'll move to the issue to do with the Society of Private Medical and Dental Practitioners, who have also released a statement on our current situation with regards to the COVID-19 pandemic and some of the challenges they feel that government must look at quickly. Now, earlier we were talking about testing. They are saying that the testing is reduced to a few centers, and they believe it should be opened up. Private institutions should be allowed in terms of medical facilities to also do these testing, as well as the issue of PPEs again coming up in the conversation, and the supply of oxygen, and so many interesting things that they've put out there, and how we as a society are dealing with the pandemic proper. That issue too have been raised. So let me start with you, Samens, on the issues raised by the private. They have been making these demands from day one, but it appears nobody is listening to them.
That's very unfortunate. In fact, in all our conversations regarding the SHS, nobody has even mentioned the private SHS schools. Mm-hmm. It hasn't come up at all. Yeah. So we tend to forget these people. That's true. We tend to forget, and it's very unfortunate. I think that the policy maker or the government or whoever is in charge should be more thorough when they are dealing with issues to do with education and health. It's not business as usual. We are in a pandemic, for God's sake. So it shouldn't be business as usual. Oh, yeah, catch No, that's not it. You catch and you follow through and make sure it is done, so you can report back to the president appropriately. At times when I see the direction, I am tempted to believe that somebody is lying to the president. Now, if you come to Accra and Kumasi, or the major urban areas, you have more private medical outlets than government outlets. Now, what that suggests to me is that the random visits to hospitals will happen more with medical facilities, private facilities than government facilities. That means that every policy that we make should consider in whole the inclusion of the private medical facilities. From where we sit, it doesn't look like that. Mm-hmm. If they are doing it, I apologize. But where we sit, it doesn't look like that. Now, this is the problem. They don't have PPEs. They are supposed to buy. Yeah. Indeed, they are private, so they are supposed to buy. But this is a public health issue. It's a pandemic. Mm-hmm. It means that if you don't protect the private health delivery facilities, it can get out of hand. The government institutions alone cannot handle. And this is what we are seeing. Now, when people visit the hospital, they don't go with the thinking that they have COVID. They go with the experience that they are not feeling well. Yeah. First port of call is a certain private clinic. Mm-hmm. Doctor deals with them and suspects COVID. Now, between the time of their first visit and the time of suspicion and the time that samples are taken to the laboratory and the time the results come could be anything between 2 weeks and 1 month. So you see how the private medical facilities are exposed totally. So that is why I think that they are stakeholders. And I heard Nsiansare saying that then they should come and sit with us. Then they should come and sit with us. Mr. Nsiansare, that's not how you do it. You invite them. You don't tell them they should come. They should come and sit. If they have anything, they should come. No, you should have even preempted and called them to sit down. And when you are formulating your policies, you consider their issues. Now, for me, I think at this point, any private medical facility that is working towards this COVID effort is sacrificing for the nation. Because you are not going to get your money back. And that's why we should meet them halfway. So I 100% agree with the call.
Because how long can they sustain this, what they're doing?
Well, some of them have shut down. Some of them have shut down. Because one, they are exposed to, they themselves, when they need access to the testing facilities, it takes them at times weeks.
I mean, I think that's really the point. The issue about PPE, for example, of course, we don't have enough of that. I thought some time ago that there was the promise of, producing some huge number. We understand a lot of them are disposable. After first use, you can't use them again. But I thought the plan was to keep producing them so that we never run out. Some of them, once you use it 1-2 hours, you cannot use them again. The issue about supplying, PPE generally to private facilities, I don't think it should have even been a discussion. Government or the government should supply them even for free, because I'm not sure they will. They are using it for the cause. It's a public health concern. So when somebody comes to the facility and you have to use it, the other thing is that the person will have to pay for it because they are a private institution or entity. They are not running necessarily, or they're not running to make losses. So when they use it, I understand that one averagely costs around 250 cedis. The person will have to pay for it. In certain instances, they wear it to deal with somebody, and it turns out that the person even didn't have it or doesn't have the disease. So it becomes waste in that sense. But it's precautionary. Government must find a way of meeting them halfway. In fact, they are even calling for subsidizing it. I would think they will just supply them. But they are asking for it to be subsidized and made available so they can buy or they can use. I don't think that should be a problem at all. There's a way the structure works. They are supposed to be working with a district health directory, because the country is zoned into districts and municipalities and metros. They are supposed to be working with the assemblies, the health directorate of the assemblies. I don't know how effective those structures are in the critical areas, the urban areas, for example. Maybe in the rural areas, the district health directorates are stronger and more powerful, and even in those cases, very few private facilities. I don't know how strong those arrangements are. I think we need to revisit that arrangement and make sure that it works as we have on paper, or it works as we are supposed, or as we expect them to work. It's disappointing to say that you are waiting for them to come and sit with you, when indeed you should actually be reaching out to them. That is how you do it. You reach out to them. You don't even wait for them to complain. They should be part of the solution. So that they are part of the solution. They are seeing it together. And there will be no time for them to even be writing statements and be complaining about things which are not being done. If the private facilities fail, we have failed in this fight. A lot of people, for many reasons, do not go to even public hospitals because of the numbers, etc. So they are more likely to attend a small private facility somewhere. A small private facility. How are they going to manage buying PPE every time?
Use just for
that is not the way to do it. So I think government must sit up, the health ministry, GHS, and all those relevant bodies must ensure that they meet the private facilities halfway. We don't have to leave them to be complaining the way they are complaining. It is not a public matter alone. And so it's been an interesting point about, and I'm digressing a bit, about the private senior high schools. Really, nobody has spoken about them. Nobody has even checked how. I'm not sure anybody has even checked.
Most of them have shut down.
But there are students there who will be writing exams.
Some have just even 1 or 2 students. It's a sad. Somebody will say it's a sad thing. Anyway, let's move to another issue that is brewing all over the place to do with GBC and the National Communications Authority. So I'll quickly read 2 letters that we've gotten on this matter. The first one to the Director General of the Ghana Broadcasting Corporation, coming from the Minister of Communications, Mrs. Esla Owusu-Ekufo, and it says intention to reduce the number of channels GBC is operating on the National Digital Terrestrial Television Platform. This is with reference to the virtual meeting held on Thursday, 25th June 2020, between the Ministry of Communications and your outfit. Further to the above-mentioned discussions, the ministry hereby notifies you of its intention to reduce the number of channels your outfit currently occupies on the National Digital Terrestrial Television Network from 6 to 3 channels. This is to ensure that there is redundancy on the national DDT platform, which is currently at full capacity. You will therefore be required to consolidate your program in line with the directive. Kindly note that upon the planned future expansion of capacity on the network, which has been delayed due to the current pandemic and the uncertainties generated in global supply chains, you will be allocated additional channels. Please take note to implement this directive within 60 days of receipt of this letter. Then GBC writes a letter to the chairman of the National Commission. This letter is signed by its Director General, Professor Amin Al-Hassan. And this one says, Dear Sir, GBC asks to lose 3 of its 6 channels of the National DTT platform. I have the instruction of the Board of Directors of GBC to communicate the following to you. The Ministry of Communications has notified GBC that it will reduce GBC's channels on the National DTT platform from 6 to 3 channels. The Honorable Minister of Communication, Mrs. Esla Owusu-Ekufo, initially informed GBC via a virtual meeting and followed up with a letter, a copy of which has been attached. The Minister of Communication has given GBC a 60-day period to comply with the instruction. GBC currently operates GTV, GBC News, GTV Sports Plus, GBC Obonu, GTV Live, and Ghana Learning TV. Complying with the request of the minister will mean GBC has to lose 3 of these channels. It will virtually mean that GBC will have to reduce its operations by half. This request will also impose serious budgetary and human resource challenges on its operations and indeed can collapse the public service broadcaster. It is with these implications in mind that the Board of Directors has instructed me to communicate this to the National Media Commission and request your urgent intervention on behalf of GBC. Then the letter goes on to clarify the various channels and what they do. Samuel, is this discussion falls solely on you because you understand these issues more than the 2 of us being, media.
Let me tell
Watch and listen.
I only heard this thing last night, to be fair. So it's not something that I'm familiar with,
Okay.
and I'm talking about the nature of the exchanges between the Communications Ministry and GBC. So I wouldn't put myself out there as somebody who's well versed in these things.
Okay.
So, but if you want to ask a particular
That's
question,
called modesty.
That's not modesty, exactly the case. but let's start with the concerns being raised by GBC about the reduction of the channels from 3 to 6 and the fact that if they go ahead with that, it will have dire consequences on its operations, even saying that they may have to shut down the company because of the reductions and all that. From where you said, what is this whole thing? The DTT, who's sitting, or is it different from the spectrum, the channel? What's the state's power? Yeah, T1, T2, the state's power over all this. And don't tell us that you are not well versed in it.
who is well versed in these things. My little industry knowledge. Now I see. Okay, so this whole digitalization thing is what has brought us here, which means that changing from an analog system of consuming television to a digital system. Now, the world over, that's been the trend. In fact, indeed, Ghana is even late in joining the world. And so we are all moving in that direction. My own recollections that when this thing started, GBC as an entity was given the responsibility of hosting and managing the digital platform. So which is our first attempt. Now this can be likened to what the BBC does in the UK. The BBC hosts and manages the digital platform which houses all the other commercial channels. Okay. So that was our attempt. Now, we private broadcasters were against it.
Okay.
We actually fought it, that I remember, to the extent that the then government had to review that, look, GBC will become a referee and a player. In the case of the United Kingdom, the BBC does not take part in commercial rent. They are not commercial. So technically, they are not competing with you.
Yeah.
But here, GBC goes for adverts the same way we go for adverts. So they are competitors and they are going to money. So we fought the thing.
Yeah.
Thankfully, there was an upgrade of the digital system, the DTT2, which is the T2. And so the government then decided to create a new platform which would then be managed by a neutral company, which is, they call the I forget the name, but an independent, government-owned, but independent company to manage the T2, that's the DTT new platform. Now, at this time, GBC had already started the first one that they call T1. Now, because they started, they were able to allot themselves 6 channels. The rest of the channels were given out to all these churches and other stations that were operating on the digital channel at the time. So that's what we had until the new T2 started. Now, the new T2 has a maximum capacity of 42 channels. 42 channels. And the 42 channels, my understanding is that it's exhausted. Now, out of the 42, GBC has 6 channels. GBC already has 6 channels on T1. And they were also given T2 6 channels. The question I ask is whether GBC, for the life of it, has ever applied for a frequency before. That's one question. Whether GBC has ever applied to the NCA for a frequency before. And we all know the answer. GBC's, the way the governments in and out have dealt with GBC is that normally the communications ministry or the information ministry will instruct the NCA to assign frequencies to GBC without GBC applying. Now, if the communications ministry can assign frequencies to you, you are telling me that they can't take it away from you?
They can.
This is the question that people should be answering. Another thing is that no company, no entity owns frequencies. The frequencies, they are rented to you, they are leased to you. You never own it. So GBC have frequencies, in this case channels, assigned to them, but they don't own it. It's not their property. It's still a property of the state. And you are accountable for it, but the state can withdraw it anytime. So I think that the technical and legal arguments are flawed. There may be appropriation and moral questions about it. But even that, if they take you off DTT or T2, people can still watch you on T1. And indeed, a lot more sets out there are able to access T1 programming than T2, because T2 is an upgrade, meaning that normally you need to have one of the newer versions of the digital TV to have access.
Okay.
So GBC can still be viewed on T1. All they are saying is that reduce it from 3 channels to 2 channels. Granted, maybe
from 6 to 3.
From 6 to 3. Maybe you have formatted your operations around the 6.
Yeah.
So that will inconvenience you. So let's look at how we can manage that. So that's also a legitimate point. But to say that the communications ministry has no right, I disagree. They have every right to do that because they wrote and you were given. So they can withdraw it. And the thing about a media commission, I don't think the media commission has anything to do with this. The media commission has nothing to do with this. Look, at best they can advise.
Okay.
They can just advise so that we see. Look, another thing is this: 42 channels exhausted. Now the ministry is now looking at having the pay TV channels on this existing platform. We don't have any channels to use for pay TV. And for the industry to grow, we need a pay TV. For this, our industry to grow, it's a requirement that we have the pay TV. And if we don't have the pay TV channels, we are just joking. Because this is how the Black Stars, the local creative companies, the Shirley Frimpong Mansos of this world, can start making proper money. The musicians, Sakawale can decide that I have paid for 1 hour on pay TV. So if you want to watch me, just pay and watch. This is how we are going to recreate our local content industry without the pay TV. So if they are reclaiming for the purposes of releasing them for the pay TV, then there's no problem with that.
Okay.
But if they are claiming so that they will go and give to their friends, then that's where the problem will arise.
What about the issue of media oppression being raised by the likes of Reku Brobe and the NDC?
Oh, that's a joke. Oh, that's a joke. What's that? What's media oppression about this? Reku Brobe said that's media oppression, that we have given you frequencies for a particular reason, and we are saying that because of constraints, our current constraints, because listen, it's either that or we have to roll out another bouquet of another 42 channels, which is going to cost us millions of dollars, which we don't have. So in the meantime, can we retrieve 3? And nobody is saying that we are taking you off, just 3. When we were kids, we used to watch everything. We used to watch Ghana drama, IB drama, everything on one GBC black and white. We didn't die. So if GBC has 3, I think it should suffice. SABC, the biggest of the biggest in on the continent, has 5 channels, and they are not even using all the 5 channels.
Okay.
So for us to say that it's media oppression, which one is oppression?
All right.
Oppression? No, I think that's far-fetched. It's, let's be real. It's not fair to even use the word oppression in this discourse. Oppression? Who's being oppressed?
Okay. We have to.
No, I was thinking oppression because they have 6 channels or 6 outlets to transmit. You're taking 3 away from them. But I think the point you made about they still being present on the T1 has to be emphasized.
Well, again, to be fair to them, I think, if I'm not mistaken, the T1 in the longer term will also be collapsed.
Okay.
I think.
But we are told that when the migration is done, they'll get back the 3 that they are taking. The T2, when you finish, I don't know your technical
so when they finish,
but when they finish the expansion,
the
they can still get the 3 that are being taken now from the T2.
I don't know.
That's what the letter says. So
no, I don't know that.
Is that the phase 2?
Yes, the phase 2.
I don't know that because this phase 2 has been coming since
forever. That's why they don't want to give the other thing. But gentlemen, we have to leave it here. Up next is Vivian's View. Don't go away. my view is on whether or not we should close senior high schools. Now, over the past weeks, calls for the closure of senior high schools following the increase in the number of COVID-19 cases have intensified. We have calls coming from parents to teachers to practitioners in the education sector. The latest to demand the shutdown of schools were 4 pre-tertiary education unions, including the National Association of Graduate Teachers and the Ghana National Association of Teachers. Now, they want it to be done immediately to avert any catastrophe. But the government has declined to shut down the schools, with its key reason being the avoidance of a backlog of students when this is all over, which is a COVID-19 pandemic. About 400,000 final year senior high school students are currently in school, and at least 110 COVID-19 cases have been recorded in 34 schools. Now, demands for the shutdown will definitely continue till parents and staff and other stakeholders are convinced the students are safe. Now, I covered the agitations of worried parents when Accra Girls Senior High School recorded its first case of the virus. And during that period, it was clear that authorities from education, whether it was health and even communications, had failed to properly do what was expected from them. It is only natural that a parent will be worried about the award in these circumstances, or a teacher will be concerned about their health or that of their students in this period. Now, the various unions, a large chunk of teachers who are taking care of these students in the schools now, in that statement of theirs on July 15, said that the government's assertion that it had provided all the needed facilities and materials for pre-tertiary institutions to operate safely and avert the spread of COVID-19 in the various institutions are not accurate. Our own checks here at City TV have revealed that indeed a number of schools are not well prepared to handle this Herculean task they have been given. Now, given that the students are already in school, and in some cases they may have been exposed to the virus, it makes it difficult to allow the students back into the communities now, till we are all clear in our minds that they have not contracted the disease. It is my view that the students are better off staying in the schools for now. But with that in mind, our concern should rather now be on 1, how we can avoid further spread of the virus in the schools. 2, how we can improve the quality of infirmaries which act as an immediate and holding area when a case is suspected. 3, how to communicate the status of wards quickly and effectively to parents. Also, how to properly ensure that students adhere to the key safety protocols, and how to provide adequate PPEs to the schools. We therefore need to beef up Ghana's current testing regime and ensure the environmental safety of the schools, and also come up with a clear plan to ensure that students can take their exams in peace and safety while suppressing the spread of the virus in the schools in particular and the larger community in general, and make sure that the disinfection of the schools must not be a one-off event given the developments we are seeing. It is only prudent we now do it as often as possible to instill confidence in all concerned. This has been Vivian's View. My name is Vivian Kailoko. Thank you so much for watching what the papers are saying. Goodbye.